But we are still missing two commission members. We'll wait just a couple of minutes and give them a little more time to get here.
Dressed up and everything.
Yeah, sure, it would be nice.
We are still missing two members, but we do have a quorum. So I will call this meeting to order. Brian, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I will call for any changes to the agenda. Nothing. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
We have first and a movement and a second. Do I hear any objections? Call for a vote. Approved. Announcements. I have an announcement I would like to make, and then it'll be open to everybody else. The mission of this group is to answer one overriding question. Can the county government deliver the services it provides more effectively? Cost is not the most important factor. The cheapest government would be no government, but the law of the jungle. That is neither a legal option nor desirable for most people. Every person who testifies, every question asked of them, should all be directed toward new information pertinent to this mission, the effective delivery of county services. The people who come to testify before this commission come here on a voluntary basis. We do not have subpoena power. Please remember this and treat every one of our visitors with respect. Both members of this commission and observers have commented upon the repetitive nature of some of the questioning. To address the concerns voiced, I will change the approach to the questioning. We'll go around the room. Each member or alternate will ask one question with the option of one follow-up question to clarify an answer. When we've gone full circle, we will repeat as necessary. Are there any announcements other than that? No. Call for approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes of last month's meeting? Anyone need more time? Excellent. A motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Seconded. Call for vote. Approval of the minutes? Yes? So approved. As far as I know, we have no reports outstanding, no old business outstanding, so we'll move straight to the new business. I'd like to welcome both Brent Regan and Steve Matheson here to testify before us tonight. If you would like to lead off, Brent?
Certainly.
Please go forward.
All right. Thank you all for entertaining me and having me to your committee. I certainly appreciate it, and applaud you for stepping up and volunteering to do this. By way of introduction, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit so you know who you're talking to. If you know me, my reputation, you probably know me by the reputation that's been portrayed in the media or in the press, and that's not necessarily accurate. I am the chairman of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, which is a conservative think tank located down in Boise. I'm also chairman of the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee. I'm the state party rules chairman of the standing committee for the rules for our state party. I was also chairman for the Citizens Committee for Election Integrity. In the course of my tenure at the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee, we've become one of the most significant, consequential committees in the state. But those are just my hobbies. In the real life, I am actually a serial entrepreneur, innovator, and inventor. And I'm an expert in systems integration work, putting complex things together, diagnosing the problems that occur when you do that, figuring out how they work, and solving the problem. So over the years, over the last 4 decades, I've become a bit of an expert in diagnosing problems with complex systems. And so as I'm going to speak to you today and answer your questions, that's the perspective I'm coming from. There was some concern that I was watching the video of your last meeting that I would come here as a doctrinaire Republican and just recite political doctrine, and that's not at all how I approach problems. I don't arrive at conclusions through doctrine. I arrive at conclusions through critical thinking and rational analysis. And I hope to share a little bit with that tonight and kind of give you some tools that you may find helpful when looking at this problem and helping to evaluate various solutions. So with that, I can kind of give you a brief overview to sort of avoid the time-consuming 20 questions. I can give you a quick overview, and then if we have questions after that, we can go. If that's acceptable.
Certainly. That's
all right. Good. So in analyzing any problem, you usually start with the basic questions, right? Why are we here? What is the goal of why we're here? What's broken, and what do we got to do to fix it? So we're here to review our government and write a report. At least that's what the resolution said. Now, I did hear Chairman say that we're here to figure out what the most effective delivery of county services. And the last meeting, it was discussing let me be sure I get the words right here. They're tasked to decide if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective. And I can answer that question right off and say no. Our current form of government is not the most efficient and effective, categorically. So, but that doesn't really answer the question as to why we're actually here. Why was this convened? And we had county commissioner who made a campaign pledge and said we would look at this problem and see if there's a better way of doing it. And so here we are. And nothing wrong with that. If that's a question that we need to answer, let's get to it. There was a matter before the voters back in 2012 is whether or not they were going to eliminate elected offices. That was soundly defeated, 2/3 to 1/3. In fact, up in your precincts, up in the northern part of the county, went down 3 to 1, 75% to 25%, because people in the unincorporated rural areas had no appetite for losing their elected officials. And there's another kind of I won't say a fallacy, but a sort of misconception that occurs. County government doesn't affect the entire population of the county. County government mostly affects the 30% of the population that is not in incorporated areas. 70% of the population lives in cities. So if I'm in Coeur d'Alene and I got a complaint for government, I go to the city government, not to the county government. So there's very little that the county government does that has a direct impact on people who live in the municipalities. So you have to take that into consideration, that most of the people that are being affected by this are rural residents and not the vast majority of people that live in the municipalities. So what's the goal of this committee? Well, under the resolution that was adopted, you're supposed to produce a report. And the chairman said that you're tasked to decide if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective. And as I said, it's not. But the question I have for that is tasked by who? Who tasked you with deciding if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective. And that's a question that I wasn't able to find in the public record. I went through the minutes and I looked a little bit on the videos, but where that directive comes from, in my experience as a chairman, I would have said, committeemen, I propose that our task at hand is to decide if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective, and we'd have debate and then vote on it. And as a committee, we would decide if that's what we were going to do or not. So the idea that this comes down from somewhere and you're having a public meeting about it, we really should know where. And I would like to find that answer at some point, but that's not really germane to what we're doing right now. But it is something I'd like to find out why. And you're also supposed to be answering 14 questions. And where did those 14 questions come from? So, and were they ever adopted by this committee? And again, I'm going off the minutes from the May 26th meeting here and watching the video. Next question is, what is broken? And again, in reviewing the meeting minutes and the statements by the chairman, he says that there are 400 meetings a year for the county commissioners, and that's just too much. Is it? 400 meetings a year is 2 a day. When I was in business and I had a engineering department under me or a company under me, 2 meetings a day was trivial. That's an easy day. I'd have 4 or 5 meetings a day. So I'm not sure that that is too much. That's only 9 a week. And so is that really a thing that's broken or not? I don't know. And the 14 questions that were asked are really 14 solutions. They're not problems, right? Are we going to have elected and unelected officials? Are we going to have 1 commissioner, or 5 commissioners, or 3 commissioners? Those are all solutions. They aren't questions. So the question remains in my mind, what's broken that we're trying to fix, right? Now, perhaps we could be, as it alludes to, we could infer from this that we could be more efficient. And certainly that's always a goal in any organization is to be more efficient. And perhaps we could have better interoperability between the various departments. We have the elected officials and they each have their kind of silo and there's some question as to whether or not those work together. But this idea that we've got these 14 questions that you have to answer, it sounds like a solution looking for a problem and not a problem statement that we need to go on and solve. But having said that, how do we fix it, right? If there is a problem and we can identify it, how do we fix it? We don't really know what the problems are, but again, from the last study commission and from the statements that have been made and statements made by some of the county commissioners, we can infer that there are basically 3 major areas that we need to look at. Eliminate electing positions, or eliminating or consolidating elected positions, whether we should have a county manager or executive, and those are 2 different things, and whether we should change from 3 full-time to 5 part-time commissioners or some other number. I'll analyze just 3 to 5 as a convenient number. So let's examine those 3. If we've got a county manager, and a county manager is specified in law. That's the term county manager, county executive, and executive has been kind of bantered around. And we need to be sure that we're specific when we're talking about county manager. That is a legally defined term that is under Chapter 53, Title 31. They're hired by the Board of County Commissioners. They have general administration authority. They have enforcement authority. They have executive authority to appoint and hire. And the voters don't elect them. The voters only elect the county commissioners. So there is no direct accountability from the county manager to the voters. It's via the county commissioners, right? Now we've been talking about, or there's this talk about eliminating elected officials. And certainly there is a more efficient form of government. In fact, the most efficient form of government is a benevolent dictatorship. Always has been throughout time and history. And it's actually more common than you think. Every small business is a benevolent dictatorship, right? You've got the boss at the top. They make all the decisions. They hire and fire. They make all the critical decisions top to bottom. In fact, Commissioner Dan Green, I'll use him as an example, fine man. He had, before becoming a county commissioner, he had a wholesale lumber business. And he would buy lots of lumber. That would be a gold mine now. But he would buy these large lots of lumber and then sell them. And he was operating on fairly small margins, so efficiency was critical to him. but he was a dictator in his business, a benevolent dictator. But if we apply that in government, there's no accountability. Dictators don't have any accountability. In business, well, actually, let me back up. All dynamic systems, no matter what they are, have to have some kind of negative feedback if they're going to be stable. If they don't have negative feedback, they'll become unstable. And the simplest example I can give you is your toilet. You flush your toilet, the unmentionables disappear somewhere, but then the tank starts to fill. Water flows in and the tank's level comes up. Well, what prevents the tank from overflowing and flooding your house? There's a negative feedback mechanism in the float and the valve which shuts off the water flow after it reaches a certain level. And that is a stable system with negative feedback. So in Dan Green's case, in his business, the negative feedback is provided by the customer. If you don't satisfy the customer doesn't buy your goods because that's a voluntary transaction. And if he doesn't buy your goods, you go out of business. So the benevolent dictator is actually a stable system because there's negative feedback through the customer. Okay? But compare that to government, right? We are all forced to be customers of government because we live here. Right? And if we don't pay our taxes, if we don't give them the money, they can come to us with guns and force us to do it, or take our property or put us in jail. Ask Dan Green. So where does the feedback come there? Where is the stability in that system? And the stability comes in the ability for the people to fire their elected officials and take away that power that they have to compel you to pay, to put the gun to your head and take your money, basically. So that accountability is a critical thing. And if the customer that you're serving doesn't like what you're doing, they'll strip you of that power. Okay? And that's how the feedback loop looks. So what we're looking at here is not an idea of having maximum efficiency. What we're looking for is the balance between efficiency and accountability in order to keep the system stable. Okay? Let's take a look at what happens now if we don't have accountability, or an example of what happened with accountability and then what would happen without it. A while back, Dan English was the clerk, and he had a case of embezzlement. One of his employees was embezzling from the county. Now, when that broke, obviously, Dan had some questions to answer. Why did you have the bad judgment to hire this person, or why didn't you supervise them properly to allow them to embezzle from the county? Okay, so there was a direct connection between the employee and the guy that was elected, and he had to answer for those things. Now imagine a county manager situation, right? The embezzling employee works for an appointed clerk who was hired by an appointed county manager, who then works for 5 part-time county commissioners. Where is the accountability? As the voter, you look at that situation and say, who do I blame? Well, the county commissioners are going to do this, right? It's the other guy that did it. And the county manager will simply say, that's a human resources issue. We can't talk about it. And it's done. No accountability. Okay? So that's the problem and that's the threat. And the threat of being fired by an election, you don't have to actually fire the person for that to be effective. You all go out and there's a myriad of laws and you're all law-abiding citizens. Why? Not because you've broken the law and been thrown in jail, because you know if you break the law, bad things will happen. The threat of being fired through the elected official is the thing that compels the elected official to make sure that they're doing their job properly, and that's what provides the stability. So now, let's look at the flip side. Let's do a quick thought experiment and imagine that 100% of county employees, 100% were elected. What situation would you have that? Now, there's 850 county employees. Do you know how many elected officials or elected offices there are in Kootenai County? You'd probably be shocked when I tell you it's about 250. Everybody with taxing authority. But for this thought experiment, let's imagine all 850 are hired. And you go to the janitor and you say, janitor, I really need you to clean over here. And the janitor says, well, my voters say they want me to clean over here. Right? And so there is no operational imperative for those employees to do their job.
I'm sorry, I have to connect the phone. Someone's waiting to participate by phone.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
And so, as a result of that, you've got an unworkable situation because you don't have hierarchical control over the employees, right? They're not incentivized to listen to their bosses.
Should we just pause while they?
Yeah, I'll do that.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Brian, there was 3 chairs here at this table. Do you
wanna
want to
join
join us? We have plenty of room.
It's okay, it's kind of
Nope.
warm. It's kind of warm, but that close. I'll sit here. If you change your mind.
Yeah.
I
The chairs
will
right
speak
there.
up if I need to hear. Thank you. Proper number of tables here before.
Oh,
Yes.
Well, Nancy.
technology is going to be the death of us all.
Nancy.
I'm so sorry.
Responsible.
Haven't seen you get walking. You still doing that? I haven't seen you walking lately.
Been gone for a couple of weeks. Back to
Where were you?
down south in Ketchum.
Okay.
Had a great time.
Hello?
Kristen?
Hi, coming through.
All right, very good.
I apologize.
No worries. Technology, it's always the curse of us here.
Yes.
So let's take a look at 3 full-time commissioners versus 5 part-time. And by part-time, let's call that half-time. So instead of 40 hours a week, they work 20 hours a week. So our 5 commissioners better informed than 3. One of the things that I've heard the commissioners complain about is there's not enough time to be fully informed of the questions before you. Well, if you're a half-time commissioner, you got half the time to be informed. So how could you become more informed with more commissioners? Because all the commissioners need to be informed in order to make informed decisions that the commission makes. So, and with more people, you're going to have more questions to staff because one of the commissioners isn't going to get it or not understand or have a question. So that'll be a greater load to staff if you have more commissioners. It doesn't matter if they're full-time or half-time. You get better representation. And is it easier to contact a commissioner? Well, if you've got 3 commissioners working 40 hours a week, that's 120 hours a week. If you got 5 commissioners working 20 hours a week, that's 100 hours a week. That's 20 less hours. So if you take from that the fixed amount of time that each commissioner has to spend on the job, whether you're full or part-time, you have a significantly less time to deal with your constituents if you're on the clock as a part-time commissioner than a full-time commissioner. So that's not a very good argument. It's always been said that if you want to call in and talk to a commissioner, that if you have more of them part-time, it'll be easier to do. Well, that's only the case if your phone system is jammed up. I don't call in to talk to a county commissioner and they say, you're number 6 to talk to the county commissioner. No, you get right through. So until such point as they're saturated with calls, it really doesn't matter how many you have. So 5 isn't a better. The next one is really kind of interesting. Do you get stronger representation with more commissioners due to fewer people per representative, per commissioner, right? You got more commissioners, people per, that ratio is higher. And I think the fallacy in this occurs because we think about representation at the federal level, and that's a zero-sum game. There are 435 representatives, and if we have 2 representatives from Idaho, we got 2. If we get 3, we have 50% more representation than we had before, and somebody else loses some. Okay, so it's a pool, and we're struggling to get our part of that pool. But with the county commissioners deal with the entire county, so we get 100% of them no matter what. Okay, so if I'm a guy who has a question for a county commissioner, or say I got a problem I want solved, and imagine for a minute you could talk to 2 people on the 2 commissioners. One commissioner had 20% of the power, and the other commissioner had 33% of the power. Which one would you want to talk to? The one with more power, right? You would want to talk to one of 3 as opposed to one of 5, because you would have somebody that had more influence on the committee. So for the times that you do want to talk to a commissioner, you want fewer of them. It'd be great if there was one. You could just go to one guy, make your case, and you go, yeah, of course, we're golden. But if there's five, or if there's three, you got to make your case to two of them. If there's five, you got to make your case to three of them. That's 50% more work, right? If I'm a citizen and I've got a problem on my property and I need some variance or something from the county commissioners, my effort goes up by 50% with more commissioners, okay? And that's a bad thing for citizens because there's less. Now, what happens in that is that the threshold for a decision with three commissioners is at 67%, 2/3. Okay, you get the 2/3, you're golden. If you've got five commissioners, the threshold is 60%, three of the five. Okay, so that's 7% easier with five commissioners to get what you want if you're doing a lot of it. Right? So if you're going to the county commissioners all the time, like a developer might, and you don't mind the fact that you're having to work a little harder, the threshold for getting what you want is lower with more commissioners. And that plays out in the long run. If I have a free throw average of 90% or 80% in basketball, right? And I make one shot, the difference between 90% or 80% isn't really going to affect that one shot. It's probably going to go in. Okay, so if I have to deal with the county commissioners once, and I only have to talk to two guys, I'm probably getting it, right? But if I'm making 100 shots, that average will show up. That little change between 90% and 80% will show up. The difference between 66% and 60% will show up. So if I'm a builder, if I'm a contractor, if I'm somebody who deals a lot with the county, then I really want to have more commissioners because it lowers the threshold about which I get acceptance to do what I want to do. So it's good for contractors. It's not good for individual citizens who have occasional use. What's the cost of 3 full-time versus 5 half-time? Well, let's assume half-time is half salary, and just for round numbers, let's say the commissioner gets a raw salary of $100,000. Please don't kick me. And so half-time is $50,000, but that's not loaded costs. Loaded costs, there are costs that are incurred for every employee, and they're not proportional to their salary. Some are fixed, some are proportional to their salary. But so the loaded cost for $100,000 might be $133,000, and the loaded cost for $50,000 salary might be $75,000. Okay, so 3 times 133,000 brings you up to $400,000 a year for your commissioners. 5 times 75,000 is $375,000 a year. So it sounds like you're making a $25,000 benefit there, but remember, you're getting fewer commissioner hours. So if you divide those out, you find out that with 3 commissioners, you're paying $64 for a commissioner hour. Every hour that he's there, you're chugging out $64. But with 5 part-time, you're putting out $72 for every commissioner hour. So it's more expensive to have more commissioners on a part-time basis than it is. So you're the accountant, and you know your financial analysis will surely show this after you put in the fully loaded costs. So how do we fix it? Is the next topic. How do we fix what we got? Well, is it broken? And we're talking about let's improve the efficiency. Well, all right, and improve effective delivery. Is that really a thing? You know, this whole effort, there wasn't pitchforks and torches outside and mobs pounding on the door and saying you must fix county government. So this is an incremental thing. But there is one thing that is apparent, I think, just looking at the problem from 30,000 feet, and it's an understandable problem, and that's one of siloing. Okay, you have these 7 elected officials, and their peers, really, right? They're all at the same level. They're all elected officials, and they have departments underneath them, and so they all have code required, law required things that they have to do, things that are specific to their task that they need to do. But there's nothing to say they have to play well together. There's nothing in the law that says you have to, if this guy makes a request, you have to satisfy. And so this siloing tends to create animosity. And it's true in government, it's true in business and big corporations. If you have departments that are isolated, that you've got peer-to-peer problems. Now, if I was a county commissioner, or if I was in charge of a system that had a bunch of silos like this, and somebody said to me, I said, Brent, we're going to give you one superpower to use to fix this problem. What would it be? That's clear. Give me the checkbook. Give me budgetary authority over those departments. I can make a department head hop on one foot and bark like a dog if I've got budgetary power. And so what we need to do is give the commissioners budget. Oh, wait, they already have it. So why aren't they using it? Why aren't they using it to improve this interoperability? Right? Good question, and I'd like a good answer to that. So they're either unwilling or unable to use it, and it might have to do with just the politics of playing with budgets, but it's a power that they have, and if they use it effectively, they would be able to get what they wanted. I'm sorry. It's a golden rule. You got the gold, you make the rules. So how do we find this solution that we want? How do we find a better solution? Well, if there was only an existence proof, right? An existence proof is something that you know works somewhere else and you can come and apply it here in a similar situation, in a similar condition. And well, if we search very, very hard in Idaho, we'll find 53 other counties that use this form of government. So if we're worried about how to improve it, the nuances, and we've got 53 examples that we can go and look at and say, how is this better than, and try and steal the best idea and the best problems of each. Now, one of the complaints I heard, listening to the tapes, was that as we grow, we get bigger problems, and so we got bigger problems, we have to deal with these bigger problems. And I said, okay, let's talk to the biggest county there is. Let's talk to Ada. I called Rod Beck, Commissioner Rod Beck. I got his phone number. I called him up and I said, hey, Rod, how you doing? He goes, just fine. I said, what do you think about this idea for a county manager? He goes, it's a terrible idea. There's no accountability. I said, I know. And he goes, tell me about the organization of your BOCC. Now, I know our county commissioners have, I think, 5 staff. So I figured Ada County, it's a 2.7 times the budget that we've got. I think they have 482,000 people, $280 million budget. We've got 165,000 people and $103 million budget. Okay, so they're much bigger than we are. Surely, if we grew to as big as Ada, it would take at least 20 years. So if we use the Ada model, we should be good to go for quite a while, right? So what do? What does Ada County do? Well, they've got 3 clerks who are, I believe they're deputized by the clerk. So they're actual clerks that are sitting here that can take the minutes and do the meetings and make the recordings, and the clerks can cross-check each other's work, and they work as kind of a team, if you will. And then there's an office manager, so that's 4. The office manager answers the phone and makes sure the coffee's filled and whatever, but manages the BOC office. And then they've got a PIO, a public information officer, and that is a professional. He was actually a former reporter, and that's the person that deals with talking to the public, press releases, social media, all the information channels that need to happen. And then finally, there's a chief operating officer, and that makes a total of 6. 6 for a county that's 2.7 times larger than us. I said, whoa, what's the COO? Because I know what a chief operating officer is in business. What is it in the county? And he goes, oh, that's easy. I got a job description here. The essential functions. Under the direction of the BOCC, oversees, organizes, and improves county operation, advises BOCC on a variety of county issues, and assists in the development of county policies, procedures, and practices. Coordinates with the BOC initiatives to create ethical, open, and transparent government operation. Develops and maintains strong cooperation working relations with department heads, elected officials, and staff to support community and accomplishment of the county goals and objectives. Briefs the BOCC on matters concern and secure information requiring for proper action. Supports department directors, day-to-day issues, special projects, urgent matters to assist in solution development. Provides advice and assistance to the BOCC on county service delivery and improvement. This goes on. That sounds like exactly what we need here. We got a guy who's a chief operating officer. It's not, you don't have to run a ballot initiative. You can just go out and hire the guy. and say, go to these department heads and establish a good relationship and meet with them and make sure that he's both glue and grease, right? Grease to make the information flow and glue to hold everybody together. And it works for Ada County. So we know it works because it's happening right now with us. To give you an idea of where we are just in general, as I said, Kootenai County has 165,000 people with a $103 million budget. So it costs our county $620 per person per year to operate. Okay? Ada County has 482,000 people, $280 million, $580 per person per year to operate. So they're $40 cheaper than us. And that kind of makes sense because as you get bigger, there should be economies of scale and it should get less expensive. And then we look at Canyon County. Canyon County has 230,000 people, $65,000 or more. They have their same budget, $103 million. So they operate at $447 per person. So what are they doing that we're not? Right? Now, Canyon County doesn't have all the municipalities, and municipalities tend to pack in more people, and there's a lot of factors in there. So this is just a very rough look, but it gives you a flavor for where we are among the other counties and what's happening. Now, I would imagine if you go to smaller counties, Bonner and Bannock and that, you're going to find the cost per citizen actually has to go up, right? Because there's essential functions that you have to provide, and those are fixed regardless of the size of the county. They were talking, and I'm getting a little off field here, but you're talking that you should be interviewing other cities, interviewing cities and getting their form of government. Well, cities aren't counties, right? They have a different problem set and different things. You should be interviewing other counties, and there's plenty of other counties. In fact, I talked to Commissioner Beck, and I asked him if he'd be willing to testify via Zoom or video conference to your committee, and he said, absolutely, be happy to. So if you'd like that, I'm more than happy to facilitate that and make sure that you guys can interview the guy who's running a county that's 2.7 times bigger than ours and doing it effectively, apparently. And they had the initiative. They had the voter initiative 15 years ago. It was defeated soundly. And before Beck and Davidson took over, there were two Democrats, and they were pushing to have, excuse me for going partisan here, but they were pushing to do this, a study commission like this. And as soon as Beck and Davidson took over, that got shelved, and they didn't see a need for it. I listened to Dan Gookin the other day at Pachyderm, and he was telling me all about the city council and the structure and all the horrible problems that they're having with the city council, and how the council is, they're part-time and they're not fully informed, and they're just yes men for the administrators, and the sheriff and the mayor kind of does what he wants, and he's going on and all these problems. And I'm listening to him, and I said, and finally I asked the question. I said, Dan, it seems to me that the problem here isn't the form of government, because Kootenai County's got problems, the county government has problems, the city has problems. It doesn't seem to be the form of government. It seems to be the people that are in government that you need to address. And he agreed with me. He said, well, yeah. So you may talk to city governments and you may say, hey, we have this problem. Do you have that problem? They'll say, no, we don't have that problem. No, you have this other problem here that we have. No, we don't have that problem. But you got to ask them, what problems do you have? And they're going to have a whole nother slate of problems that you don't have because of their form of government. You're trading one set of known problems for another set of unknown problems. And that can be very risky and expensive. Cities don't have jails. They don't collect property taxes. There's no coroner. There's no indigent care. So if you're comparing counties and cities, you're trying to find the best orange juice by drinking apple juice. Right? They're both beverages, right? So talk to the counties. And then getting back, Mr. Chairman, I know that you're a finance guy, and there you can go through and you can analyze the cost of change and look at how much you got to pay for these guys, how much you got to pay for these guys, and what's the whole total and all that. But in my years of experience in consulting, I've solved problems for companies. And one of my clients was moving their facility just 4 miles down the road. And I went to the president of the company, and I told him, I said, Bruce, you better lay up at least 3 months of inventory. And he goes, why? And I said, well, you've been in that old facility for 20 years. When you move, you're going to find out that there's things you did that you didn't even know you were doing. It was like muscle memory. And you're going to have systems collapsing on you. You won't be able to do stuff. People will forget. They won't be able to operate because everything isn't where everything is used to being. And you might have 2, 3, 4 months of shutdown. And in fact, I got a call from him 3 months after the move. He said, Brent, we got this horrible problem. You got to come help us fix it. Long story short, it's because they changed their air supply system. The filters on their air supply system was causing this problem in their product that they were trying to deliver. So if you change the government significantly, if you change the department significantly, there are going to be huge losses in efficiency that occur because of the change. And it will take months, if not a year, before you're up to 100% operating. So you got to take those unknown fields and say, this is something's really. So a general rule in engineering is you don't change anything unless you see a 15 or 20% increase. So you got to have a huge, obvious improvement before you change anything. In fact, Intel, the famous semiconductor manufacturer, when they established a production line and they wanted to duplicate that production line, they had a rule that it said it would be exactly the same. Exactly the same. They could change nothing. Not the machine model. Even if the manufacturer came out with a newer model machine that was better, no. We wanted exactly the same because they knew that once you dial in a process, once you get something working, you make any change, that perturbation causes inefficiencies. So there are tangible costs associated with change, and they're intangible. And the intangibles are a lot bigger than you think they are, and they will bite you in the backside. So be cognizant of that. Okay? So, to review, why are we here? Campaign promise. What's the goal? Tasked to decide if the current form of government is the most effective and efficient. And I'd say that that's not really a goal because there is a far more efficient one. And what you're trying to do is balance between accountability and efficiency. You're trying to find that sweet spot. The fact that there are 43 other counties that have found this same sweet spot that we're in is a strong indicator that we're there. And what we should really do is tweak around the edges and not try to mess with the structure. You should be answering the 14 questions, as the chairman said. But I would like to know, where'd the mission come from? You know, other than this resolution, which says you're going to study and report, where is the more depth of that? Is that something that you guys decided to do collectively, or did that just come down from somewhere? Is that and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but that sounds like a covert, not public meeting, right? If all of a sudden you've got this direction and you don't know where it came from, it's important that the public know. I want to know. Okay. We say there's too many meetings for commissioners, and yet we have other commissioners in larger counties with lots of meetings, and they can get it done. You know, so where's the problem there? And the interoperability between departments, there's a solution for that. This chief operating officer and the skill set that they're looking for is right there, right? And here's another caution that I'll bring you from the business side, and businessmen will know this to their bone. You cannot possibly know, and I know you're all smart people, but sitting here in this and doing interviews and talking to my wife's idiot husband isn't going to give you the information you need to know to make kinds of decisions that's going to, how this guy should change his department. Okay? I wouldn't presume to know how to change the Treasurer's Department until I spent 2,000 hours working there, getting to know every little nuance and how things are actually done. And if you just say, oh, it's obvious, we got to make this change. If you do make that change, and that comes down and it changes something in Mr. Matheson's department, now you own it. Now you own it. Because when a county commissioner or someone comes to Mr. Matheson and says, I would like report ABC after they've gone in and muddled up his whole department. I want report ABC. And Mr. Matheson will say, well, okay, commissioners, I'd be happy to give you report ABC, except when you did that, you screwed it up. It's going to take me 6 months to get you report ABC. That's what happens. If you think you're going to go from the outside and micromanage on the inside, the right way to do it, the effective way to do it, and the way that I've learned to do it after many times doing it wrong, is that you articulate to the department what you expect of them and then let them figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, you call them on the carpet then and say, you got to get this figured out. All right? And what changes do you need to figure it out? And you go that route instead of jumping over their heads and trying to change it. If you change it from the outside, all the future problems that department has, you're going to own. And, you know, the county commissioners won't take the blame. They'll point to the study commission. They'll point to you guys and say, well, they told us to do it. You know, it's always one of these in politics. So I think the smart, low-risk thing to do is to copy what works in larger counties. I think you should do your due diligence and your research to come up with that. But I do believe that if you adopt the ADA structure with the 3 clerks, an office manager, a PIO, and most importantly, the CIO, the COO, the Chief Operating Office for interdepartmental efficiency, I think that you'll be able to achieve the goal of higher efficiency that you're looking for without upsetting the voters. I can tell you categorically that if you go to the voters and say we're going to take away 1 or 2 or 3 of your elected officials, that will fail. It will fail. And the reason it will fail is quite simple. There's a law that says that the county can't spend any money to make the case. So you're going to battle with a highly organized political machine that's used to getting their people elected and getting measures passed. And we'd be coming out full-fledged against not taking away elected officials. And the county really just can put us on the desk and say, let's talk about it. So you'd be at a huge disadvantage politically, just making the case. So I would strongly encourage you to not go that direction. And because you don't want to be the committee that proposed the thing that got shot down again. All right. So with that, I would just remind all of us that we collectively, everybody in this room, is not smarter than 43 other counties. Okay? The collective wisdom and the long-term knowledge that is embodied there and how they do things, I think that provides us with a powerful lesson and all kinds of good ideas that we can steal. And so I would strongly encourage you to talk to other counties, try to pick their best ideas, and then put those together as a report to the county commissioners and say, here guys, here's what we think from our interviews with other counties that are doing it, how you guys can do it. And with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Before we go to questions, I'd like to give Steve a chance. Steve Matheson.
I'm here to answer questions. I have no opening statement. I'm here to.
Can you speak a little more loudly?
I'm here to answer questions. I'm not here to make a statement. So I stand for questions as well.
Okay. When you get a chance, Dave, do you have any questions?
I've been trying to do this, so can you get back to me? I do have a
Let's
question.
start, Brian.
Actually, I do have a question,
Yes.
and it's more of a question of what's not being done, and I don't know if I'm not aware of how the county government actually goes, but my question is more of a strategic plan type of thing. The county, how can we or how should we be planning for the future better when you have different organizations that may have different priorities? And I don't mean anybody's not having the good of the county in mind, but in the companies I've worked for, usually you have a strategic plan that comes from a corporate level, and it's central. You know, it's a central thing, and then it's allocated with input from all the other departments. I don't know how you do that and how the other counties do that. And I think strategic planning for growth, for needing of another county office for headcount, not looking at productivity improvements and efficiency, automation and all that. So how does strategic planning happen, or should it happen? I'll ask Steve to go first and then Grant on that.
Strategic planning, I believe, is the responsibility of the county commissioners as it relates to a number of aspects of the county operations. planning for facilities, planning for personnel, planning for growth. Those are the responsibilities of the commissioners. The other row officers that I've heard many of you describe will participate in that, but they are not the initiators, they are not the instigators, they are not the final decision makers. It is the county commissioners.
But if a individual, if let's say since you're here, if you didn't support the strategic plan, how would that be done then?
I,
You're asking Steve?
Yeah, I'm asking Steve as an office, as an elected official, I'm just trying to understand, we heard a lot about inefficiencies. I'm not sure how, I agree that there are intangible costs of any change we make. I get all that. I'm just looking at what changes could be made. What are the problems we have today? What are things that are not working as efficient as it could? And then how would you do it and how would you rally everybody? I understand the budget implications and you could say you're not going to get money, but that's also not realistic because you have to provide certain services to the citizens and you have to give them money to individual departments. So I'm really just trying to understand, let's say the county commissioners did come up with a strategic plan and you or other officials did not agree with it. What happens?
I'm not sure. We would have to have the conversation. I think you would have to be a little bit more granular in when you say strategic plans, because I've heard this conversation many times over the last several decades. It's nebulous. I don't understand exactly what strategic means. Does it mean providing services for a particular segment of the population? Is it more described, or are we focusing on facilities of the county that it's going to need? Is it something beyond that? I need a little bit more definition of what strategic means. We can talk about the court systems and do we need more courts? Can we talk about DMV and the resources maybe that we need there? I struggle with just this nebulous strategic planning. I don't know what that means.
That's fair. And I think that I was just trying to understand the concept and strategic is very nebulous on that. The question is, if you look at growth, if we would have 10 years ago started to worry about, even though economy was like 12, 13 years ago, economy was not that good. But if we were worried about growth over the next 20 years, would we have done something different? And how would that have been done? And what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that is the role of the county commissioners with collaboration with the individual elected officials and the county employees.
It is, but the other thing that I think you have to appreciate is many of the obligations that the county have are not determined by the county commissioners or the elected officials. They're dictated by the state of Idaho.
Okay.
Unlike a municipality who gets to choose whether they exist or not, the county does not have that choice. And we have to operate under the policies and the procedures and the guidelines and the statutes that are established by the legislature. We don't get to pick and choose when we're going to follow and ones we're not.
Okay.
So it goes beyond just the commissioners. It also includes the legislature. And I would imagine you would have to include the governor, since he is going to sign any statute that is going to be implemented. It's a big issue. One of the things that I'd like to echo off of what I heard Brent say earlier about the collective 43 other counties. There's 44 counties. There's also a time horizon here too. You go back over 100 years where that collective knowledge, each and every year, these issues come up and legislation is proposed, statutes are changed, county government is changed as a result. So there are 9 elected officials in each of those 44 counties. Someone can do the math, but that's a lot of people over a lot of years that have been asking these questions. How can we make it better? How can we make it more responsive? Can we make it more representative? How can we make it more effective? How can we make it more efficient? I go down to Boise each and every year, and we spend weeks talking about this. So there's not only 44 counties that have been doing this, but we've been doing it for over 100 years. And I think that process, although it is frustrating as hell, and it's difficult, and it's slow, and it's laborious, and it sure as hell isn't efficient, seems to be moving the ball down the court or down the field.
Thank you.
If I could address the efficiency or
sure.
the strategic planning question. In the 80s, the strategic planning and mission statements, that was all the vogue in business, right? Everybody had to have a strategic plan, and dealing with what's coming up isn't strategically, it's just planning, right? We just need planning for the future. We have requirements for facilities. We have requirements for traffic. We have requirements for infrastructure. And these are all fairly linear things, right? There's not a big, exponential hockey stick curve that we have to deal with. These are fairly linear things. So, the county commissioners, all the culture in flows from the top, flows from leadership. So the county commissioners really should be the ones that are tasked, and they don't have the time to do it themselves, but they should be given direction like they did to this committee. I would be a lot happier if instead of grinding on this problem and using all your enormous brains to grind on this problem, if you were grinding on the problem of what do we do about facilities for the county, or how are we going to deal with infrastructure, traffic, or one of those things that affects people's daily lives, not just the little incremental improvements in government that helps out a complaining county commissioner or two, but what can you do that helps everybody? And so I wish that's what was going on. And forget strategic planning. Strategic planning is how do we take over Bonner County? and we're not going to do that.
Right.
So let's just encourage planning. And I always say you can't plan the future, but you can plan for the future. And we know that growth is coming. We're cursed with living in a beautiful place that everybody wants to live in. And so they come flocking in, and we know it's going to happen, so we should plan for that. Thank you.
Brian?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Tamara?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I was remiss in not saying that to the other panel members the last few times, so I wanted to make sure I got that out. Over the course of the last few meetings, the correlation between a business and a government keeps coming up. A business, like you said, has the benevolent dictator, and it basically boils down to the bottom line. For a business, it's profit for its shareholders. Government's business is to serve the people, represent the will of the people. Do you see a correlation between the two? Can we meld the two? Because a benevolent dictatorship is not a representative government. And streamlining it, you basically have one agenda that then is told to the people, whereas a representative government, you're trying to represent different viewpoints, different people, different perspectives. So the analogy was made multiple times of a grocery store, and that they walk in and, the meat department, the produce department, and all that. I'll ask you, do you feel that's a proper analogy to how our government is set up with the row officials? And is there a difference between efficiency and streamlining and effectiveness of representing the people? I'll start with Brent and then go to...
So, excellent question. Thank you. And there was a time when I believed that government should be operated more like a business, because I was a businessman, right? And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had my own business since I was 13. And so I thought, well, that's obvious. And then I came to realize that it really is the stability of the system that's important. Okay, when I was talking about you need the feedback, you need the ability to fire people through elections, and they need to be at the right points in the system so that you can change things. So they have the department heads, and then there's a fairly shallow hierarchical structure under each one of those department heads. So that if somebody screws up, that it goes right to the boss. You can find the boss, and the next campaign, that boss is put under the magnifying glass as a result of that. So that's your feedback loop that keeps the system stable. If you go to a county manager where there's just that one guy at the top and he's making all the calls, I'm an engineer and I'm a pretty good one. And the reason I am is because I imagine all the bad things that can happen and plan for them. You know, I design navigation systems for airplanes. So I don't have the luxury of pretending that something is going to work. I got to actually plan for all the bad things that can happen, a lightning strike or a power outage or all these things. So when I see this system with the county manager, I say, well, that's just, you're just ripe for corruption, right? You're ripe for abuses there, because where's the control of the voter on that system? So, you know, and this tug of war has been going on, like Steve says, for 100 years. Where is the correct point? At what point do you have enough elected officials to have the system stable, but not so many that it bogs it down? You know, the shock absorber on your car is set to a certain damping ratio, right? If every time it went up, it was slow to come down, you'd drive the car over bumps and the car would settle because it wouldn't be coming back up. It was too much damping, right? Too much negative feedback. And so if you have too many elected officials, right, you don't have enough cooperation between departments, and that's a problem. And not enough, and you've got this benevolent dictator. So the idea that it's a business, the government can be a business, you're really comparing two completely separate things, because you don't have the, I don't voluntarily pay my property tax. I have to pay it. I'm compelled to pay it, okay? Whereas in a business, it's completely an arm's length transaction, and I have to get value or I won't buy it, okay? Here, I have to get value or I'm gonna fire somebody and government. And so that's the balancing act that you have to have. And if you look at it in that frame, I think it becomes pretty clear. I hope that answers your question.
They're completely different animals. There are different things, disciplines that go between both government and private business. But the awesome power that government has is something completely different. We have the power to arrest you, try you, put you in jail. We can confiscate your property. I can kick you out of your house. There are so many different powers that are instilled within a county government that, in my opinion, you want them separated as much as possible. In my opinion, the commissioners have too much power. I would be going the other direction. So there is a complete and distinct difference. They are different animals, and they have to be looked at differently.
When you say a different direction, what do you mean by that?
Direction?
You said you would go a completely different direction with the county commissioners and too much power.
I think that this study commission is contemplating a structure where more power is going to be in that county commissioner function through the manager or through an executive who then hires. To me, they have more power than I'm comfortable with as a citizen. I cannot tell you how many times I have resisted what the commissioners are trying to do that I believe are wrong or inconsistent with statute. And as a elected official, I've had the courage and the ability to step up and say, no, we are not going to write that check for that purpose. And now we have a standstill. I have control over the treasury, what goes in and what goes out. And many times when the commissioners make a decision that I disagree with, I am going to be one of the first to stand up and say, the check's not getting cut. It's not going out the door until you do this, that, or the other thing.
So, Mr. Matheson.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Brian Cleary, I'm the study commissioner.
Can we make sure you're being picked up on mic, Brad?
Sure. Can I sing for you? I was just wondering about a comment that was made earlier, or an observation about the commissioners control the budget. That's their leverage. Yet you were just saying something that kind of struck me as a bit of a contrast to that, which was if you disagree with something, you're not cutting the check. So where does that power lie? Is it a balance between the commissioners and you?
It's a constant struggle, and it's not just me and the commissioners, it's also the clerk. Both the clerk and I sign the checks.
Mm-hmm.
I control the bank account. I control the treasury. There are a lot of checks and balances, again, that have occurred over 100 years that have said, well, we want this control in it. And I'm saying we, I'm talking about us. We want this control. We don't want this concentration of power. So it is very messy, and sometimes it's in the press as being messy and embarrassing. But it was designed that way for, I think, a particular reason, and that is segregating that authority to a point where we are all, as members of Kootenai County, comfortable with what government is doing. So, again, if anything, I would reduce the power of the commissioners, not increase the power.
So just for clarification, you're saying, in your opinion, that a county executive or a county manager would increase commissioner's power or centralize it in that area, or?
I'm trying not to come across as either a pro or negative on what you guys are doing. This is a task that you guys have been assigned. I'm trying to answer questions without too much bias, but in my humble opinion, a manager would increase that power and an executive would decrease the power, because an executive is elected by the people and they answer to the people. So two different distinct questions.
Okay.
If you're going down the manager part, that is going to concentrate power. I don't believe that's a good thing. I don't want my commissioners having that much power.
To Steve's point, obviously, if you have a manager or an executive, that concentrates power because they have higher and higher ability over the people, that over the heads of the departments. So that alone is tremendous leverage. You've taken it away from the voter and given it to this guy. You're having much more power concentrated at the top. Kurt?
You mentioned in passing the Ada Study Commission that was similar to this one. Do you have any more insights as to how far that got? Because you talked about it basically getting shelved at one point.
Yes, actually, I believe that there were two. I think it was brought to the voters about 12 or 15 years ago. Again, I was talking to Commissioner Beck, and he was going off of memory on this. So if you interview him, you could ask him that question, and I'm sure he'd have an answer for you. But yeah, there was one, call it 15 years ago, that actually went up for a vote and was shot down, similar to what happened here. And then there was there was a talk about creating a commission about a year ago. And then when Beck and Davidson got elected, that was taken off the table.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
No questions at this time.
Bill?
Okay, thank you. And thank you both for being here. I talked to you on the phone once. Mr. Regan, I don't know you, but I'd like clarification if I could. You put a lot of focusing, from both of you, on accountability. Now, as a citizen, I look to, if I have a problem, I look at my city commission, my county commission, or whatever. I don't think I'm going to call the treasurer. I'm going to call the clerk. It's the commission. I think generally is how people think. And I don't know of a problem at the present time, but there are 9 people elected to what is a very vertical span of control. There's not a whole lot once you get below the commissioners and these different elected people. But if you're elected a county commissioner and you get through the election, you have an opponent, and you get 8,000 votes, and someone else is elected to be any place, clerk, treasurer, and that person gets 12,000 votes, and you go to that person and you want something, they can pretty much say, I don't really care. Now, I don't know if that's happening, but doesn't that lose the accountability in some ways, almost make it like a popularity contest? And I'm not trying to judge. I'm just saying, could that happen? And is that a unintended consequence, I guess, if they're not elected?
Go ahead.
Okay. So as I understand your question, you're saying that because the elected officials are essentially directly responsible to the voters, then there's no reason for this interoperability. They can tell each other to go fly a kite. And you're exactly right. That is the problem. that you have this siloing between the departments, and Mr. Matheson is saying, I won't write the check, and the clerk is saying, I won't sign the check, and the commissioner, and so this kind of friction develops when you have everybody kind of at the same level. Now, one solution is to strip down their power and centralize it. And that's a great solution if you live in Russia or China, okay? But I wouldn't recommend it here. The other solution is to put a system in place, something in place that improve that interoperability. And when I heard about this, chief operating officer down in Ada County, I immediately went, ding, that sounds like, because that guy's job, his job, depends on making all the cats play together. And so if you have somebody that's their mission in life, then they might succeed at it, or at least improve it. So yeah, I agree with you completely that this, having it as the popularity contest at our elections, right? That you're responsible to the voter and not each other. And so let's see if we can tweak that problem without losing the accountability.
Okay. Let me take it one step further. I don't know exactly how this is defined, but Ms. Batson, I know you were listed as the county administrator, and I'm not sure what those duties are. But what I'm asking is, if not a chief executive, not a county manager, would some type of administrator who has some oversight authority be beneficial, who was not elected, appointed by the county commission? Would that be as effective, or more effective than what we have right now as far as efficiency and effectiveness, I guess, that's all. Either one.
Well, once again, you're asking me my opinion. I'm trying to stay away from offering an opinion, but
Right.
let me just clarify a couple of things that you said, and maybe make a point. I have three roles. One of them is public administration, which is the task of, if an individual dies within Kootenai County and there is no personal representative, I take over managing the estate. One thing, when you go through some of the complexities of what the county is doing, right off the bat, I am representing the deceased and the estate, and the county likely has claims against that estate. In particular, county assistants, which reports up to the clerk. They want their money and they want it now. Now I have to step into that role and manage it the best interest of the estate. So if we're all reporting up to the same person or the administrator, how is that reconciled? I don't know. I also have the role as ex officio tax collector.
Right.
All right. So I have
I knew I didn't like you for something else.
I have a fiduciary responsibility, not to the county commissioners, but each of the 50 different taxing districts within the county. I don't think they would appreciate me reporting to a manager that reports to the commissioners. They would be saying, well, wait, time out. Whose allegiance do you have? Is it the county or is it to us? My role as county treasurer is a little bit unique, as well as all the other elected officials. These different unique things that the state has dictated that we do, we have to kind of navigate. So as the tax collector, I don't care what the commissioners have to say about it, because my fiduciary responsibility is those 50 taxing districts, one of which is the county, but there's 49 others. And then you throw in the urban renewal districts or their agencies, and things get a little bit more complicated. But whether it's the hospital, the libraries, the cities, NIC, I think if you ask them, they would want that distinction, that independence to be there. That's how I want it as a resident of this community.
Okay. Thank you both. I really appreciate you both being here, the information you've given us. Thank you.
Yes, I do have a question. It has to do more with the continuity of government when newly elected officials are appointed, or elected rather, not appointed, elected. I just would like to understand how that happens today. So when a new commissioner or a new row official gets seated, how do they get up to speed? Who's responsible for doing that?
I'm assuming you're asking me.
Well, start with you, yes.
Okay. All I can do is explain what I did, how I approached this. Whether it's representative of what others do, I don't know. I did my homework. I studied it for about 6 months. I knew kind of what I was stepping into. In fact, originally I thought I wanted to run for commissioner. And then after about a month of studying, I said, no way in heck. Impossible job. Don't want to do that. I still wanted to contribute to the community. I wanted to participate. I wanted to be active, help shape the direction of the community. So I said, well, I've got a background in finance, accounting, and all that stuff. So I'm going to do the treasurer's office. Now, when I won the election, there are chief deputies that are required by statute to have chief deputies. Now, fortunately, I had one that was experienced and willing to stay on. So she held my hand for a while. That transition is important because she recently retired and I had to go out and find a new one. Now, when I go out and find a new one, I have the discretion to either do just a political appointment where I can go through a hiring process or a combination thereof. Historically speaking, most of those appointments of chief deputies are either one of two people, someone that's in the office already, that's just elevated to chief deputy, or it's a political appointment. I view this as a very significant role. I think chief deputies are the most critical part of the management team because they do the day-to-day work and hopefully they're lasting from elected official to elected official, so there's this continuity. So I opened it up for a national search, and I was fortunate to hire the chief deputy out of Snohomish County in Washington. She was also the chief deputy out of Island County, and she also worked for King County. So although she's only been on board for a couple months, I would encourage this committee to interview her because she's worked under both a county executive, county manager, and this structure. So her perspective would be, I think, valuable as you evaluate how to proceed. Back to your question, the individual elected official determines how that transition is going to work. I have known some people to walk in and fire the chief deputy on day one. They've been elected, they get to make that call. I chose a different route.
So that makes sense as far as the row positions, but the commissioners, I don't think have any deputies underneath them. So
They
what
don't, and they
happens with
cannot have
that
deputies.
transition? Can you
In
speak to
fact,
that?
again, statutes dictate they cannot have a deputy.
Right. So can you speak to how that transition, who helps them when they take office?
It's women like Nancy and the staff that's existing in the office. And candidly, those are probably the most difficult transitions that occur because
They're also staggered.
Well, that helps, but
most of the commissioners I've seen come in do not have specific expertise. They're, coming from the business world.
right.
So it's, those are the ones that I think are the messiest, in my opinion.
So in your opinion, would having something similar to a COO that Ada County, is that correct, has, would that help that situation?
I'm trying not to give opinions. I don't want to speak for commissioners who have their own duties and responsibilities, etc. I will ask the question I think you guys might want to contemplate asking is that COO, I'm making the assumption, I haven't seen the description, it is a liaison amongst the departments that report up to the BOCC.
Is that correct?
And not the elected officials. I don't know if that includes elected officials or not.
I don't know either. It's the first I've heard of it tonight.
Yes, and to answer your question, I do believe that it is between the departments, the elected officials. And so if you've got a fellow whose job it is to interface with all these departments, by definition, he knows what they need and when they need it. So when you have a new county commissioner come in, if you had a chief operating officer, that chief operating officer would be able to nudge the county commissioner and say, by the way, you got this meeting with these guys, they're expecting this, and you should do your homework on that subject. So I think that having that framework position would be very helpful for the transition. I know if I was transitioning, and I'm not saying I want to, but if I was transitioning
That's a
into
loaded
that,
term.
yeah, there you go. If I was doing that, then I would certainly want somebody like this, whose job it was, right? Because if you go to the various department heads, like, oh, we got a sucker here, they're a new guy that we can train our way. What you want is somebody whose job it is to make it all work together. And I think having that functionality is, I saw that, I just light bulb went off my head. I said, yeah, that's exactly what you need as the county gets to a certain size and this interoperability becomes an issue.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and just interject. If the county commissioners choose to have that manager position, that does not impress me too much as it relates to their authority. Because to me, I still see myself in my position equal to the commissioners. So I believe, and I would embrace the concept of having that coordinate the 17, 18 different departments that the commissioners are responsible for. I don't know if you guys have studied this yet, but you look at our $100 million budget, about 40 million of it is directly under the control of the commissioners. My budget is $800,000. The sheriff's is about $35 million. And we go down all the different elected officials. I strongly believe that as an elected treasurer, tax collector, and public administrator, I am equal to any other elected official. And if someone were to present this COO to help manage my activities, I am going to reject that. That is not why I ran for the county treasurer's office. So that may not be helpful, but at least you know my position.
Thank you. That was helpful. Thanks.
Bruce?
I have a question. First of all, thank you both for being here tonight. One of the things about being on this commission and being able to participate is that we're not operating in uncharted territories. There's been another commission before us, and they put together this report back in 1997. And they're basically addressing the same question we are, which is, should we be recommending a new form of government? We had the same form of government back then as we do today. And it's kind of interesting because tonight I appreciate the fact that you talked about the 9 different elected officials and how they don't have to work with each other. And one of the things that the previous guests talked about was using analogies like if there was a grocery store and it had 9 different departments and you couldn't control them. And of course, it is government and not a private business. But what I'm coming to the conclusion is that our form of government that we have and its inefficiency, as some people argue, is actually a feature. It's a feature that was designed to create these checks and balances. Like hearing Mr. Matheson talk about, I'm not going to write a check for the commissioners because I don't believe that they have the legal authority to spend the money this way, is an excellent check against too much power. And if he reported to a county manager, then you would be posed with the question of do it or potentially lose your job, which as an elected official, you don't have to worry about that. So when I look at this report, I ask myself, what was wrong with our existing form of government? Mr. Regan brought it up. What's broken? And I keep asking myself that. I looked at the strengths in the report because I don't believe that there's going to be any revelation that comes up from this commission that this previous commission did not, look at. And I looked at the strengths and I found them to be rather abstract. And I look at the weaknesses of our current form of government. And in many respects, I find that to be abstract as well. But if there were real problems with our government, they should have been clear and understandable at $36 million. Today, we're at, 105 million? So I know in business, because I happen to be one of those benevolent dictators, that if you grow your business and you don't address the problems when it's small, those problems will be significantly bigger that you're going to have to deal with. They'll be more apparent. In fact, growth often reveals problems in many respects. So my question to either of you is that shouldn't we have had whatever problems there were in 1997 at $36 million, shouldn't they be magnified, amplified significantly by at least a factor of 3, and maybe exponentially, with a $105 million budget. Would that be the case?
I'm going to defer because I think it's a little bit of a leading question. I'm going to defer to you to answer what your opinion is. Again, I'm trying to stay as neutral as I can in this this conversation.
I don't think that we even have to have an opinion of this. We can look at fact, right? The county has grown 3 times in that time, or threefold in that time period. We're still here. We're still functioning. It hasn't collapsed, as you said. There's no exponential problems that have occurred. And then we say, okay, well, what's the future hold? Well, guess what? We can look to Ada County, 2.7 times larger than us still. And what does their structure look like? So we can look back and we can look forward, and we can see that that system survives into the future, into our growth future, by looking at Ada County. So if you want to plan for the future, go look at what it looks like, because we got a model. And even Canyon County, but Ada is I think a better analogy than Canyon, because maybe we look at Bonneville too, but it's the mix between municipality and rural that you got to consider. So Ada is heavily municipality, whereas we're kind of half 70-30. And I think Canyon County is more closer to 50-50. So those are the kind of factors that you kind of shade your analysis of it. But you're absolutely right that if there was a glaring fatal flaw, that it would be manifest, and we'd all be looking at it going, "Oh my goodness, we got to fix this thing." And the fact that we're not, I know the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence, but the fact that there's not something staring back in our face, and the fact that 43 other counties haven't, in the fullness of time of 100 years, haven't come up with a better way of doing it, which you think they would have. It's pretty strong evidence that we're on the right track, and we're close to maybe not the optimal solution, but we're close to it. And if we tinker a little bit around the edges, we can improve things. And I think, and then you make a small change, you watch it. Okay, it's good. Then you make another small change and you watch it. Oh, that's good too. All right. But if you do this wholesale, rip it out and put it back, you don't know what you broke if something breaks. Was it this or this other thing that we changed? So the wise thing to do when you're dealing with giant systems, interoperating systems with lots of people, and you can do a lot of harm, right? You could injure a lot of people to various degrees. The smart thing to do is you make a small incremental change. You make this little thing here, and then you sit back and you watch it. And you see how it does. If that was good, okay, let's make another little change. And that way, incrementally, carefully, you evolve into a system that's better. And we'll never get to perfect because we're people, and there was one perfect person, and he died a long time ago. So we'll do the best we can. Thank you.
Brian, any questions?
I heard that perfect person's coming back someday.
I don't think he'll want to run the county though.
I have no questions.
I do have a question specifically for you, Brent.
Yes.
This commission is early in the process of taking testimony. We've made no recommendations, yet you have decided to publicly oppose one potential option. Why did you feel it important to do so at this time?
Oh, the county manager?
No, you presented a document that was produced by the 4 row officials back in 2012. Why did you choose to do so at this time?
That's a public record document?
I agree.
Yes.
We've made no recommendations. We have not recommended that. Why did you choose to oppose that?
I presented that document. I mean, this was the viewpoint of the folks that were opposed to the original streamline, and I thought that those, since you were going over the arguments from the 1997 and also the 2012, having the other side of those arguments was a worthwhile thing to have, and people should be aware of it.
Okay. Dave? Brian?
Thank you. This is Brian over here.
Oh, Brian. I was passed over.
Brian. I keep forgetting this question every time I think of it. Must be. It's the heat.
What in your office, treasurer's office, what do you foresee as what are you currently encountering as like the biggest challenges of your office in administering its duties and functions within county government? Um, just just out of curiosity, and if you could just follow on with, what do you foresee in the future is emanating issues as population grows here, things of this nature? We experience the growth we're all witnessing. What kind of issues do you see within particular to your office that are challenges you're going to have to deal with? And do you feel that the current structure of county government is adequate to address those challenges that you may foresee, and not only just foresee but current and future?
Okay, I think there was 3 questions.
There are.
So you're
It's
gonna have to
triple
remind-
compound.
Yeah, you're gonna have
So
to
there's
remind me which
the
ones they were.
present. What challenges are in the present that your office deals with?
The Idaho state legislature. is
Yeah,
the
I was
biggest
wondering about
challenge.
that.
Yeah.
So
In
mandates
fact,
kind of thing?
It goes beyond that. I'll give you an example of why I think it's important that each of these constitutional officers remain independent. Last year, the governor wanted to issue we'll call it a tax rebate on our property taxes. And I resisted. He wanted a nice little stain on the tax statement, how much he was giving back to the property taxpayers in Kootenai County. Several of the jurisdictions chose not to participate in that. Kootenai County was one of them. So our commissioners didn't want anything at all on the tax notice. The city of Kootenai did participate. They wanted it broadcast. Look at what we did. And the governor's leaning on me saying, we want it on there. And I said no. I would think I was one of 2 counties that said no. If I was reporting to the commissioners or the managers, that would have been probably a different conversation. So that's the answer, I think, to the first question. The state legislature is the biggest concern. What they do, why they do it, how they do it. And I'm going to stop there because what I'll say next is probably not appropriate. The second question you're going to have to remind me. What was your second question?
What do you foresee as future challenges that are your office is going to face in administering its duties as the county grows?
In my office particularly, the biggest and the highest risk is we have a computer system that is 20 years past its probably prime, 10 years beyond its life cycle expected, and we're going to have to replace that, and it's going to be significant dollars, and the budget is already stretched, so that computer technology is the highest priority for me over the next 2 or 3 years. Secondary to that is staff retention. It's getting more expensive to live here. I got extremely lucky bringing someone from the Seattle area to here. So staff retention. I don't get too caught up in the weeds yet with strategic planning and what we're doing beyond my little world. I do play in other people's sandboxes once in a while, but it's usually something I choose to do, not necessarily that I'm required to do. And the third question?
So as to the challenges current and the ones you foresee, the current structure of county government, are you comfortable that the current structure is one that you can work within to address those kinds of challenges? Or do you see that some form of tweak, whether it be a recommendation to change to an optional form versus just do something different within the existing? Are there any suggestions you might have?
I don't find anything compelling to change what we have today. However, I do think we're missing the point of this conversation. It's the people that we elect for office. That's the issue. So
well, I was going to
if
ask
we
you about
elect
that.
the right people and our community takes the time to vet people and evaluate the type of people that we're electing to office, 90% of these issues go away. You're still going to have mess. You're still going to have conflict. You're still going to have hurt feelings and things in the paper, but those are good things. That friction is good. It has to stay. It's got to be there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I do not think.
Tamara?
Yeah, one follow-up to what you just said. Just to follow up to what you just said with that it has to stay, do you feel that if your elected positions become appointed, that would cause less friction, more problems? I just want more clarification on why you feel it has to stay as an elected.
I don't think I said it has to stay. I think I stated it was my preference, or that's what I'd like to do.
Okay.
I can tell you that if this became an appointed position, I'm not interested in participating. I ran for office for a particular reason, not for a job. So if you want someone to appoint as the treasurer, the tax collector, and the public administrator, go ahead and appoint them. It won't be me though.
Do you think that the election system allows us to pool from a high quality source of people versus an appointed system?
I think that's the question that you guys have to answer. Again, it's the people that we elect. That's the issue. That's the problem.
Kurt?
So, Steve, you commented earlier in some of the questions about your thoughts on power distribution for county manager versus county executive. Brent, you were kind enough to analyze the county manager approach. What is your thought regarding an elected executive role as an option, which is one of the allowed options?
My understanding of the elected executive is that there's another elected board, that there's a committee of 2 or 3 individuals at that level.
No, it's there would be the commissioners and then an elected executive, similar to the president versus Congress.
Right. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the distribution of powers? Is that individual now overseeing all the departments, and what are the county commissioners doing?
Well, the raw officials may stay there. This may just be one additional. We might have 10 elected.
Right, but what are the commissioners themselves doing?
Right.
You know, how do they interface with the executive, and are they there as effectively window dressing? You know, so I concur with Steve in that a distributed architecture would take power and you distribute it out as thinly as possible, not as possible, but as practicable, is the better architecture. It's more robust. You can have one bad area and it doesn't affect the whole system. So, you know, we're suffering now. We have some excellent people who are elected, and we have some not so elected, excellent people who are elected, and that's, you know, that's like life. Everybody has businesses. You got great employees, and you got guys that you can barely stand to see in the morning. So, you know, we can sit here and want for perfection. We're never going to get it. And the other one was the county administrator,
manager,
which was
that's what you cover.
A county administrator and a county executive.
Actually, in statute, there's only 2. There's the manager and the executive. An administrator would be similar to the COO approach.
Exactly. Only that person would oversee just the people immediately underneath the county commissioners. So
yes.
17 or so departments that report directly. You'd hire a guy that would help you manage that vertical column of responsibility.
Yeah.
The COO is more of a, you know, go out and talk to the other departments kind of guy. So, you know, you look at your problem and what the better fit would be.
Okay, thank you.
I do appreciate you bringing up the difficulty with qualified people for positions, for the elected positions, and I thank you for bringing that up.
I'm good, thank you.
Joan?
Just quickly, could you tell us how current budget works? So you elected positions, the row positions. Do you submit a budget to the BOCC and then they? No. So explain how that works.
I am going to explain it.
Just simply.
I am not the authority. The clerk is, as it relates to budget. The process works early in the year, the calendar year. We are asked to come up with a budget number, and we're usually focused almost exclusively on the expense side, some revenue side.
Okay.
We submit it to the clerk. The clerk then compiles that and then submits it to the Board of County Commissioners. And the Board of County Commissioners are the ultimate authority of challenging, approving the budget. They are the ones that in August go and have a budget hearing for the community to participate and adopt the budget at that point in time. So the clerk is the one responsible for managing the budget process. The board is the ones that approve it.
Thank you. And as far as HR goes, for you elected row officials, do you use HRs to take care of your employees, or is that separated out?
I do. This is also kind of a long story, but I have the discretion as an elected official to use HR or not. I use them because they're professionals. I respect each and every one of them, and they know a lot more than I do about everything HR. And
So-
I hate HR anyway. I mean, managing people. So I use them extensively, and they are the experts.
So each row official has the option to either use HR or not use HR?
Technically speaking, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But the county commissioners have developed policies that have been adopted by the commissioners. When we're all playing nicely, we follow them. And then when we're not playing nicely, sometimes we don't follow them. So the silo comment is accurate. I think it's one of those unfortunate negative aspects, but it's in my opinion, minor in compared to what you would have to give up if you change the structure.
Thank you.
Bruce?
No, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Regan, earlier in the beginning of your statement, you alluded to a question you had about you don't know where these 14 questions that were on a piece of paper came from, but it sounds more like there's a solution looking for a problem. That was something, just for your benefit. It is not the guiding document of this group. It is a document that was crafted and circulated by someone at one of the initial meetings, I think the first. So it is not a guiding document that we adopted, to my knowledge. With those 14 questions, these are things to be considered, but these were not mandated things that we were pondering. I think it was a guide for people to think about. So if you were concerned that this was heading in some steering in some predetermined direction, I can assure you it is not. And in fact, anytime that we engage in a discussion in the group here about recommendations in a report, one of the things I always point out at the end is we don't have to make any recommendation whatsoever. And that is on the table too. So I think you should bear that in mind. If you're under a different impression, you're incorrect.
But let me illuminate how I came to that position. And I watched the tape the last meeting. And at that last meeting, the chairman said, "We are tasked to decide if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective." And then words to the effect of, here's the 14 questions that we're going to ask, and all of our consideration has to be centered on those 14 questions. Now, my experience as a chairman is that when you have a committee such as this, and you want to give direction to yourselves, that it's such a statement. If I wanted to make it happen fast, I would say, without objection, the committee will adopt the blah, 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 blah. Read it off. The following rules. What? Any objection? None heard? That's what we're going to do. Okay. I didn't hear that part, but I did hear the directive. And if you go back and listen to the tape, it seems like pretty. And Chairman made a similar statement at the beginning of this meeting that can the county. Well, we're going to see if can the county deliver services. So these are fairly concise orders to the committee or to the commission. And I'm not sure, as a point of information, Mr. Chairman, are you organized under any set of rules, like Robert's rules or anything for this committee?
No, we're informal.
So
we use an informal variation of Roberts, but no, we are not formally following Roberts.
Okay.
To clarify, you're asking if we're following any rules. The 14 questions are specifically identified in the statutes. Those are the 14 decisions we have to make.
Yes.
Do we stay with a 3-person commission? Do we go to a 5-person commission? Do we go to a 7-person commission?
Right.
Those are statutory questions. Do we have a commission executive? Do we have a commission manager? Those are statutory questions. Do we have hired row officials, or do we have elected row officials? Each one of those row official positions is a statutory question. Should they be elected or hired?
Okay.
When you put those together, that's 14 questions that need to be answered.
Okay. And
Creating how many? Maybe you can do the numbers. Hundreds, perhaps even 1,000 permutations.
Well, I guess I object to characterizing these as statutory questions. They are not questions in the statute directed toward the study commission. They are questions derived from the statutes.
They are the questions that we are required to answer in the statute. They are the options.
They are the options. That's slightly different. Maybe we're just debating semantics.
Perhaps, but these are the options in the statute.
Understood.
and so, and you have to excuse me because engineers are a persnickety bunch, because we go after exact specifications and exactitude of language, and so that's coming out of me. So forgive me, but when you say that you're tasked to decide if the current form of government is the most efficient and effective, that's one question. Okay, and then now you're going to say we're going to go after these questions as to whether or not we should have elected or appointed people. That's a solution.
Those are we need to determine what the most effective approach is among the options that we are given.
Okay.
If we determine that the current 3-person with elected officials is the most effective approach, that can be our recommendation. And if we determine some variation, that can also be a recommendation.
I'm not going to presume to tell you how to run the committee or anything. I'm just saying that as an outside observer on this, I'm looking for exactitude, and I'm looking for what is the mission of the committee. You have the goal here of which was to conduct a study and report to the Kootenai County Board of Commissioners as required by Idaho law. Okay, so what is that report going to contain? I mean, when I design something for a customer, one of the things that we do is establish what it is you're going to do, a statement of work. And at the end, we establish a test, and we design for the test, because when you do the test and you pass the test, you're done. So how do you know when the committee is done? How do you know that you've satisfied what the requirements are and that you have a product or whatever your report is covers the things that you wanted to cover? And again, I'm not criticizing you one way or another. I'm simply suggesting that for the sake of expediency and efficiency, that as a group, you may want to say, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we know we're done. And so that when you have this report, you can clearly look at it. So does it meet the requirements of what we tasked ourselves to do? Yes, it does. Okay, here's your report, commissioners. We're done. And that's just a simple organization thing. And again, forgive me, I'm channeling my engineering self, and I tend to think in those logical terms. So
the statute 315101 makes very clear what the mission is. We don't have to carve one out for ourselves. It's clear. 315101.
I think it's 74 in the statute. 74.
It basically says study the existing form of county government, compare it to the optional forms, and submit a report and any recommendations for change to the board. That's the mission.
Okay.
So study, right?
Yep.
First you got to understand, so you study. That's what we're doing. That's why we invited you in, right? We haven't gotten to the compare it to the other forms yet. There's been some loose discussion about things like that, but mainly it's been a description of what are those other forms. What are they under the statute? Just to comprehend what they are, not debate whether they're good or bad. Right? So right now we're in the study the existing form, inviting people in, asking them, what do you do? What's good? What's bad? What are the challenges? And later we move to
and then
look at these optional forms.
It would seem from the statute then that the metric that you would use, how do we compare these forms, is something that the commission is going to have to decide. How are we going to measure it? Is it inches or feet or pounds or or dollars or man hours or what? So if you're going to say, you know, as the chairman said earlier, the most efficient form, how is that efficiency measured? You know, Warren Buffett had a great statement. It says, "You name the price, I'll name the terms." And what that says is that how you measure a thing is just as important as what you're measuring. And so those are, and again, I'm getting far afield here, and I'm just offering to the commission that these are the things that in the fullness of time you're going to want to kind of wrap your arms around if you want to have a complete product at the end of the day.
I wanted to mention also that we do have a subcommittee that's looking at other county governments, as you suggested, and we're very well aware of the difference between cities and counties, as I think we understand. I wondered from your comments, would you accept in your area any sort of oversight from someone that reports to the county board of supervisors or commissioners? An auditor, for instance.
Well, I think audit is absolutely, yeah, I have no issue verifying, attesting, reviewing, none of that. But when we're talking about authorities, that's where I draw a line. I answer to the people of Kootenai County, nobody else. So,
Does the county presently have anything that would be like an auditor of all the departments, or is each of the line officers have their own?
There have been discussions, and one that I participated, I tried to establish in the clerk an internal audit function. It has not passed the budget process. So it has been a conscious decision not to budget an internal audit function. I disagree with that, but I don't control the budget process.
Thank you. Thank both of you for coming today.
For you, Steve, do you or any of the other row officials have the ability to influence or another row official to act or to stop acting?
Describe or define what you mean influence.
The only thing that I've heard is that you can refuse to write a check that's authorized by the county commissioners.
Okay.
Do you have the ability to influence, at least influence strongly, any other row official?
Other than persuasion? No.
Other than persuasion?
Yeah. I want to go ahead.
I bring this because we've heard checks and balances.
Yes.
That's what a check is, the ability to influence another department.
Well,
So
no,
does a check exist?
Influence is not the same thing as a check.
Actually, force is more, but I was trying to go with a softer word.
I can't force anybody to do anything. Can I persuade them? Maybe if I make a valid argument. Back to the conversation of issuing a check or a warrant, so we don't confuse on the terms. It would be an interesting case if I refused to issue a warrant that the commissioners said I should offer or do. The judge would make the final decision, which I think is appropriate. If I believe that the commissioners have not followed the law in ordering me to send money from the county treasurer, which I'm obligated to protect, I think it would be appropriate then for either the commissioners to sue me or somehow try to compel me to abide by their orders. Now, if their orders make sense and they comply with law, I'm going to do it. But if they don't, or I have a different opinion, I think I have that ability to make that statement, that stance. And then they have the ability to say, okay, what's next?
So the only check you would have would be the ability to not issue a warrant, and which would be basically a check on the commissioners, not upon any other row official.
Off the top, I would have to go through because the interplay between me and the different, like for example, the assessor, they determine market values of all properties. We have a lot of interaction going back and forth. I would have to think through that pretty deeply to see if there's others that I can imagine there might be, definitely. Or with, for example, the sheriff, and he wants to establish a new banking relationship. I control banking relationships for the county, so I could say no, you don't get that banking relationship. Yeah, I could probably go through each of the different relationships with the coroner and our management of the states, and when we take over, when we don't take over. I would have to give it some more thought, but yes, there would be others. No question, especially with the clerk to be the most overlapping checks and balances, then the assessor and the coroner. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes. David, any questions? Brian?
No, thank you.
Tamara?
Just for clarification on that situation, you see that as a positive?
I do.
Okay.
Bert? Sherry? No, Phil? Joan?
No.
Bruce?
Nope.
Brian?
How do you draw legal advice?
Brian?
In the unusual circumstance you describe, hopefully it's an unusual circumstance, something that doesn't get faced all the time. How do you draw your legal counsel, the board, and you? Who do you each respectively go to get legal counsel?
By statute, I am supposed to use the prosecuting attorney and his civil staff, and they've been excellent in supporting me. Occasionally, we are in opposition I am in opposition with the Board of County Commissioners. And that's where it gets sticky, because now we have to go to outside counsel, or one of us would have to go out to outside counsel.
Yeah.
It's happened once or twice, but that's the process. The default is the prosecuting attorney.
So there's the way to manage it.
Yes.
Bob, any questions?
Can you give us a couple of examples of where you think the County Board of Supervisors steps outside their legal authority?
I'm not sure I'm willing to give that in a public setting. Recently, I'll give some of the more maybe publicly acceptable. There was a process where they wanted a check written that they did not go through the appropriate approval of the expenditure before the check was to be issued. And they wanted to rely upon a previous budgetary decision they had made in support of the expenditures, when statute requires that they have to meet separately to approve the actual expenditure, even though the spending authority was granted during the budget process. Kind of a technicality.
Yeah.
There's been some expenses that I did not agree with. Again, I don't want to go into any of it.
I understand.
We didn't have many questions. Do we need to go around again? Tamara, you have something?
I just want to say thank you for what you guys do, for coming tonight, and for the information that you've provided, and for how you serve our community. I know there's a lot. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, probably get more negative feedback than positive. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Anyone else? Gentlemen, thank you very much for your assistance.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you're dismissing us?
You're welcome to stay if you wish, or to leave. Dinner is calling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Catch a ride?
Okay. Do we have a list of potential candidates? Brian, I believe you were putting that together?
Bob was putting the list.
You were putting the questions together.
No, I have no additional people to add to the list I have.
Based on tonight's conversation or interviews, I'd like to suggest that I think we've already designated the chief deputies to be candidates, but having the commissioner from Ada talk to us via Zoom seems like it could be productive as well. So I'd like to add that person to the list.
Okay.
Was it Nancy doing the
Nancy
final
was
list?
Spreadsheet.
Nancy is out. We'll be back next week. She is listening, I believe. She was earlier. She's still listening. I'm getting confirmation on that. So Nancy will be able to add that name to the list of potential candidates that we can discuss next week then.
Okay.
I think we can defer this to next week because of Nancy's absence. I'm going to ask you, Nancy, since you've got Nancy on the other end, do we now have confirmation for next week for Commissioner Duncan and ex-Commissioner Dan Green?
I don't have that answer. I'm sorry. She sent a text saying she was getting ready to shut it off, so I don't know that she's still listening.
Okay. If you would make a note for her
I will.
to add the ADA commissioner, sorry, I've forgotten his
Do you
name.
want her to invite all ADA commissioners?
Just the one. There was one specific one
I
that came
believe
up
it was
tonight.
Beck that he
Right.
named.
You don't want any of the others, just the
No,
one?
just that one would be
Okay.
enough.
I'd like to have one other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need more than just one point of view.
We're already talking to other counties. Do you believe we need more than one from ADA?
There were two commissioners that
Brett Regan mentioned he'd spoken to one commissioner, but there was another one's name also came up in the course of.
He mentioned Davidson in passing.
Yeah, so I don't know if it'd be worth having both of them or whether they basically would say the same thing, but we might want to follow up with Brett to see.
Actually,
if it would be.
Kristen is on a subcommittee to address other counties. We'll have her talk to the commissioners down there and give her some feedback on what she thinks next week then. Or maybe not next week.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just heard back from Nancy, and yes, she has confirmed the people for next week.
Okay, so next week we have confirmed for Commissioner Duncan and ex-Commissioner Dan Green. So, following meeting, which would be get my bearings here, the 14th of July. We, I believe, have Commissioners Filios and Brooke scheduled. And the following meeting, starting the 21st of July, we're looking at the remaining 5 row officials, letting them work out among themselves what would be the best approach for the 3 meetings after that. If one of them has a conflict, a vacation scheduled, they can work between them to figure out which ones can come in on which dates. Beyond that, we're looking at bringing in the chief deputies. That's another 2 meetings. We've got 5 row officials still. We've got 5 chief deputies we're talking about bringing in. So if we do that, all told, we have 5 weeks between the row officials and the chief deputies. And then beyond that, I think the best thing to do is to take that list of potential interviews that we have that's pending and start to work out patterning in that.
I'm
Do you have any issues?
I'm still going to advocate for us scheduling a public comment session after we finish going through the chief deputies and the row officials.
That we can work out whether we want to do it that at that time or later. We're still taking comment. We're not making any decisions yet.
Understood.
So whether we take their comments in the middle or at the end.
Why not both?
Until we actually have a recommendation, what are they going to comment on?
They can comment on all the testimony that we've heard and give us their opinions on all of the very same information that we have been studying.
Then perhaps the best thing would be to allow them to hear all the testimony before they comment.
Yeah. I still think there's a value in having an earlier public comment session rather than pushing it off
Okay,
too
we
late.
can discuss that when we're talking about the interviews.
Well, we are talking about the interviews.
We're not talking about them in specific. We're talking about, we're going to have a list of potential interviews, including your candidate from ADA, that we're going to be looking at scheduling, and we can talk at that time about whether we want to schedule public comment before them, during them, or after them.
Fine. I'll keep bringing it up.
That's fine.
David, would it be helpful if we try to plan when Brian did the plan, we had a information gathering.
Yes, and that's what we're at right now.
When are we expecting that to be over?
Given the group that we're talking about now, we've got interviews through, I believe it's the end of August, maybe the late August, end of August, something like that, with the various
Yeah,
chief
potentially
deputies,
beginning
row
of
officials,
September,
chief
maybe.
deputies,
Yeah.
and so on. And then other interviewees. So as we get into the potential other interviewees, and we're talking about what kind of schedule for them, that's the time to be talking about what kind of schedule we're talking about for this too. I mean,
Okay.
right now, we can't get a schedule set for next week, or we couldn't get a schedule set. We tried to have a schedule set for this week twice and failed. So as we move down the pike, trying to schedule for 6 weeks in advance can be difficult. Let's get
I'm
through
not trying.
that schedule, and then we can move into a tight schedule, a fixed schedule for other things.
Yeah, I just was not trying to get a who's going to be on whatever week in September. It was more of how much time are we going to spend on gathering information. And I know we don't know that for certain because it is fluid. But if we had an idea that, because then the next step is to discuss it
Right.
and then make a recommendation. And using the clock, when Brian did his thing, he kind of worked back from the end date. And I just thought it might be helpful to, when we get to the interview discussion, to have an idea, are we going to go through November with interviewing people, gathering of information, or whatever?
Strictly unofficially, my
Yeah.
hope, this is not an official of anything, my hope is that we'll be able to finish the interviewing, the information gathering sometime in late September.
Right. Okay.
If we're talking to the row officials, we're talking to their chief deputies. If that takes us toward late August, we bring in other people to talk, for example, Ada County or other counties throughout the country or throughout the state. If we're bringing in the cities, as has been recommended, we can bring in several of the cities, talk to them about
Okay.
theirs. I don't want this to drag on until next July, but I hope to be able to get through most of the information gathering by late September.
Okay.
Do we have other opinions? That was opinion, that's all.
So I just have a recommendation. So I don't know what Nancy's timing is in terms of when she's coming back and stuff, but it would be helpful, I think, if we could see that list that she's compiling maybe a day or two before our next meeting on the interview
Nancy is
potential.
working from afar. She is helping us out with this type of stuff. She put the minutes together for us today. I believe that she will probably have that to us. She will be back next week, or at least her expectation is that she will be back next week and be able to be here Wednesday.
Yeah, I'd like a day or so to review it before we walk in.
If Nancy can put that together, I'm sure she will.
Okay, thanks.
Any other issues to be brought up? Otherwise, we can adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Oh, Karen, go ahead.
Sorry. On your announcement, we went ahead and enacted that as protocol. So is that a dictate coming from the chair that that's how we're going to work from here? Or is that, because we didn't vote on it, we didn't talk about it, you announced it, and then we just did it.
We haven't done anything. He just announced it and
He
it went
announced,
out.
but no, we followed the structure of what he said in his
just
announcement.
the order of questions.
I do not want to make a dictate of it. However, we were having problems before. People were commenting about it. I had comments both from members of this commission and observers about the way things were going. And this was something that we tried, and it seemed to work.
Could we see those comments? I mean, if there's a name, you could black it out. I would like to see what the comments.
I wasn't receiving anything in writing.
Oh,
it was all verbal.
Did you find tonight's approach to asking questions?
Oh, no, I thought it was very structured and it was organized. I just found it interesting that as a committee that you stipulated it and then we just did it, but there was no actually open discussion that was going to be okay with everybody. I think it actually worked fine. I have no problem with it. It was just how it was implemented, I guess, is my question.
I know we're violating the agenda and we can't make a decision, but is there any open discussion on what we did tonight? Does anyone have a problem with the way we did it?
I thought it worked very well.
So did I.
I liked it very
I liked it.
Yeah, I appreciated it.
Okay.
No, I was fine with
is everyone
how it
amenable to
happened.
continuing that for now at least?
Sure.
Until we find something that works better?
I think that we did have some flexibility. I mean, occasionally Brian interleaved some questions and things like that, and I think that
He
worked
missed it.
okay. Well,
He missed the announcement. He came
whatever.
in
I
empty-handed
mean,
enough.
I still think there was a little bit of interleaving, and I think it was okay. It wasn't as chaotic as perhaps your commentators have brought to your attention in previous meetings. So I thought it worked okay.
Oh, I have no problem with how it worked. I just felt that it was more of a, this is what we're going to do, instead of, hey, how about, would this work with everybody? Are we okay with that?
It was an experiment.
Well, it was a good one. I don't have a problem with it. I just had a little problem with
I also
implementation.
like when you have
Hang on,
follow-up questions.
Let Bob first.
I also enjoyed the follow-up questions. You know, we're going around as we did today. It worked fine.
Mhm.
And when somebody pops in or, you know, as a follow-up, I think it works real well.
Joan?
Yeah, I think the chairman has a role that when there is feedback on things that are not working well, to bring forth to the group, not necessarily a vote, but some structure to the meeting as well. So I appreciate that.
Phil?
Yeah, I'd make a motion this experiment be implemented each week. Takes the question out of it.
Until we find a better
because that's an
approach.
action item, and we cannot
Thank you,
add
thank you.
actions to
Come
the
on, Kirk,
agenda.
give me a break.
Until we find a better approach, Phil. So, Nancy?
I just got new word from Nancy that she will have that list emailed out before the next meeting.
Oh, thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank her for us.
So then now I'll move to adjourn.
Hang on, we've got something first.
To do this, but I'm just saying on there was something about draft questions on the agenda tonight. If we could punt that to next week and work on it more, but I did circulate the draft questions for people that I'd received.
Yes, I did receive that.
Yeah, so
Anyone else did?
it was just on the agenda. I didn't know if you covered it in the minutes that I wasn't here, but okay. So if we could just punt that till the next week, I'm fine with that.
We'll do that then.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We already had a second. Tamara had seconded. Vote for, opposed. We're adjourned.
It was bad.
It's